Okay, I think we're gonna get going. It's 11:15 according to Apple iPhone, so we will commence. Thank you all for coming. This is a great crowd. We really look forward to this discussion about open access, the kind of analysis you could do. If there's no microphone, if for some reason you can't hear, let me know, or the other speakers think I'm fairly loud. So I'm sorry I can't see the people over here because I'm short and this computer's like right in my face. Okay, so let me introduce us first. I'm Ann Beynon. I work at Clarivate at the Institute for Scientific Information, which is the bibliometric research group and thought leadership group at Clarivate. I'm joined by Shawn Hendrikx, Collections and Content Strategies Librarian at Western University in Canada, and Laurel Crawford, Manager of Collection Strategy at Johns Hopkins University. So we're really happy to have a Canadian and a US perspective on this particular panel today. We're each going to talk for roughly 10 minutes and then we will have time for Q&A. We want to hear from you. We have a lot of content, so it will be pretty quick, trying to jam it all in. We do have case studies about the stories that you're going to hear from Shawn and Laurel. We have it printed out here if you'd like, but also there's QR codes at the end if you want to snap them with your picture. So I'm going to kick us off with some framing and some analysis to help you start thinking about what you can do with bibliometric data to help support these decisions about open access. So I think if you're here, that it's a complex world that you're all trying to navigate with open access publishing and read and publish agreements. And we know that you're trying to make the best decisions for your institution when you're entering those agreements. But also, I think now that some of these agreements have been in place for a few years, people are trying to assess the success of them and, the outcomes. Like, did this have the intended effect, right? So we can help with that. If you're in the US, of course, there's the Nelson Memo that's impacting decisions, helping prepare for that. So you need trustworthy data. Bibliometric data is one of those data points, not the only data point, of course, but it can be very, very useful. So you can answer some of these key questions with the data. I won't read them now. We'll go through them one by one in the interest of time. The data that we're using here is from our tool called Insights Benchmarking and Analytics, which comes from Clarivate, and you'll see it used by the other speakers. It draws on the data from Web of Science Core Collection, which is a collection of over 22,000 trustworthy journals. We're very well known for selecting the journals, making sure they're high quality, but also includes books and conferences. It covers not just science, but arts and humanities and social sciences as well. Very global, has a lot of open access, very agnostic to the business model of the journals, known for having very reliable and consistent metadata, large citation network. You might know it. The data and insights is 1980 forward and gets updated monthly. So just a little bit about where this is all coming from. Some other important points are that there's various subject classifications in insights. So we have various journal category schemes that users can utilize, but also article level topical schemes. So for instance, you can look at all the journals in immunology, but you can also look at the topic of coronavirus. So whatever level makes sense. And we have the ability to look at author positions. So papers where, let's say, your institution's authors were first or last or corresponding, which becomes very important to do the APC analysis. So all of that is possible. How are we defining open access? So we work with Unpaywall, which is a service that looks at article level open access. And it covers, I think, over 50,000 institutional repositories and sources to identify at the article level if something is open. We won't go through all this, but just so you know, there are different flavors of open access that we track. This is how we define it. Any of the data you see that says all open access is all of that, including the green. And then there is a bucket for non-open access. So if we cannot find, the article in any repository, it's not gold, it's not hybrid, it's not free to read on a publisher website, it's not. An article can be in multiple categories, right? So something can maybe be free to read, so it's on a publisher website, but doesn't have an explicit CC license, but also is in an institutional repository, so it's green. So just so you know, it can have multiple, and these things get updated all the time by Unpaywall. There's various indicators and insights for all these different types. both in counts and percentages. And you can run those at the institutional level, the author level, country level, etc. Okay, so some data here. I have the global backdrop in the top right there, so you can kind of see in the past 5 years what we're seeing in the Web of Science. So 51% of all the articles and reviews, which are the primary document types we're talking about here, are one version of that open access, at least, right? So, you know, getting over 50%. 36% are the gold or the gold hybrid. So just so you kind of understand globally, like what we're dealing with. And then I show you here the US on the left, and then just an example from a university to kind of show you what you could do. Just pick Penn State. I live in Pennsylvania, it's football season, it's like everywhere. So I figured, okay, we'll look at Penn State, not to pick on them. What was interesting here, so you can see the trend over the past 5 years, looking at all open access. This is percentages, okay, percentage of the output, gold hybrid, and non. And they actually tracked very, very closely, looking at like all the academic publishing in the US versus one university, being Penn State. You can see that, you know, gold, the green line here, happens to be gold, is on the rise, you know, maybe a quarter of the output. Hybrid, you know, kind of pretty stable, not increasing too much. Maybe it's different if you look at your institution, but this is just one example. Okay, so you can also break this down by discipline. So this is just an example showing these journal categories and how you can look at your institution and see what percentage of your output falls into the different buckets. So in this example, these are fields that have a lot of open access publishing at Penn State, but some of them, you know, are more falling into the green, more falling into the hybrid, so very different depending on the field and depending on, you know, the availability also of journals and funding, you know, in that field. You can look at a specific publisher. So here's an example, you know, taking Penn State, taking Springer Nature, looking at the trend of publishing for them. And again, just you can look at the different types, what's gone up, what's gone down. The non-open access has gone down, you know, so that's probably a good sign. And they could track, you know, how many hybrid articles they're publishing with that publisher. Very useful for thinking about the, you know, transformative republish agreements. Laurel will talk more about this. So, you know, when thinking about the Nelson memo, you can also bring in the funding element. So you can look at who's funding the research. We know that through the funding acknowledgments and through bringing in data from the funders themselves. So you can look at the U.S. federal funders, look at your institution, and then see, you know, what the output was, how much of it was open access. So for instance here, I sorted this by the non-open access percentage. So like DoD funded papers at Penn State have about 40% are non-open access, you know, despite, you know, prior regulations and policies. Of course, there's the embargo period for the last year that usually, you know, has lower open access in the US. And then lastly, just to show you that you can also just look at journals. So here, again, thinking like about a publisher, Springer Nature, and just picking some of the journals that are hybrid, you can see what percentage of those journals are actually hybrid gold articles, because that's something that's kind of hard to know. So you can see it's a huge range here in terms of, you know, up to 40% in, you know, some of the journals, but only single digits, you know, in others. So that can help you in your decisions. And you can see how that's changed over time. So again, just showing a couple of those journals and, you know, something like Nature, which just has the hybrid in recent years, you can see how that's increased. You know, so you can take this to the journal or publisher level as well. And then lastly, just to mention that, you know, we do have Alma, you know, as one of our products now. And there is integration between Alma and Insights. So if you happen to use Alma for your library management, there's a report that would bring your collection right into Insights so that you can very easily then, you know, do this analysis without making a lot of selections. It's already done for you. So hopefully that gives you a little background. And obviously I'm open to questions, discussion anytime, but I will pass it over to Shawn.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. So I'm coming from Canada, Western University, and I'll be speaking a bit about the context at Western Libraries and a bit about kind of the difference between value and values when assessing OA memberships, and contextualizing our work with insights within that broader analysis. So I'll speak a bit about return on investment, some of the qualitative and quantitative metrics, and go over some examples, some spreadsheets that we've created or pulled through insights. So Western University is in London, Ontario, the other London, fake London, whatever you want to call it. And we have 40,000 approximately students, and we are in research-intensive school that also has a medical school. And we are currently in a functional team organizational model, which means we don't have liaison librarians. Instead, we have teams based on collections, research scholarly communications, teaching and learning, and so on. So we have an open access standing committee, which is composed of collections librarians such as myself, and research scholarly communications librarians and others who want to participate in that group. And so the primary role of that committee is to review our OA memberships and to assess them, and also we have an OA budget, which is separate from our regular collections budget that is dedicated to our pure OA memberships. So not transformative or republish agreements, but our OA Diamond OA and OA infrastructure, that sort of thing. So we created a assessment template that we use to review our OA memberships, and our group presented on this at ERNL this past year. So you're welcome to take a look at our site and some information about that as well, and I'll dive into some of the pieces here. So beginning with return on investment, I think this one's probably the most straightforward. And in terms of what we're looking at here is how much is the library investing versus how much our authors are saving in terms of APCs. Now I'm quoting one of my colleagues here who kind of thinks of it in terms of apples to apples, apples and oranges, because it's just because the return on investment isn't better than what authors would be paying in terms of APCs, doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that we don't want to continue to support. So it can be tricky depending on the OA model. So for instance, we have a number of read and publish deals through our national consortium, CRKN, and it's not like we're going to suddenly cancel, let's say, Elsevier or Wiley, just because the return on investment isn't great in terms of the open access, APC side of things. But if we're getting great usage still, we're not going to be cutting that anytime soon. However, with others that are, let's say, purely gold OA, then we want to look a bit more closely at that. So here are some quantitative metrics that we look at, and I'll dive into it in more detail when we're looking at the spreadsheets. Our authors publishing with this publisher, what titles are they open access, that sort of thing, and kind of the percentage of OA publications for that publisher to see how far along they're progressing OA initiatives. And here is where we get into the values side of things. So I'll admit that the qualitative metrics do tend to dominate our decision making still, because whether it's usage or what have you, sometimes you still need to make that decision based off of user demand and so on. But depending on the membership, this can provide additional context to her decision. So a few pieces that I wanted to speak to here is, like, for instance, a transparent business model. And what we mean here is if the publisher is clear about how they arrive at their APC costs. Is it based on the actual cost of publishing that article, or is it based on market forces and what authors are willing to pay? So you may have a great return on investment, but it's only because the author APCs are so high. And so you really have to take that into consideration. And also, a lot of authors would choose not to publish away with that publisher if the APCs are high. So potentially, if you move to a re-publish agreement, that could make a real difference there. And under the administration column, I'll add that for us, an APC coverage cap is a deal breaker. We don't want to put a limit and say no to authors when we've told them that their APCs are going to be covered. And we don't have an APC fund because when we tried that, we blew through it within a couple months. And we don't want to pick and choose who gets their APCs covered. So as long as they qualify and they're affiliated with Western, then they should get it. So we'll be, okay. So this is why I had the backup slides. Okay, so this slide is showing the publishers that we have some form of OA agreement with, or they have an OA discount through the deal. So this isn't in particular to Western. It's just interesting to look at kind of where different publishers are at. They may be reflective of that discipline and how far along they are in the OA game, and also the difference in size, or maybe they're pure OA like Plus. So obviously, they would be doing a decent job there. This next slide here, we're looking at where Western authors are publishing by title. So it's reflective of the sizes of our different faculties and departments, but also gives you an indication of like which journal is this, or which publisher is this journal associated with? Do we have an OA agreement with them? Is there a possibility that we could do something with them in the future in order to have a greater impact on OA output at our institution? So just want to make sure I'm not missing anything else here. There is another slide, another tab that wouldn't really make sense for me to go through unless I actually had internet access. But I just wanted to mention that you can also look at what disciplines are publishing a lot of open access within your institution. So for us, we have a very successful civil engineering department, which is recognized around the world, but their OA output is very, very low. So potentially that is a place where we can maybe focus on outreach or look at publishers that may be able to help us in terms of making it easy for those authors to publish OA. It can also work the other way around, such as for our physics and astronomy folks who are publishing a lot of OA, then we can work with them to see how to make it even better, because we may have some champions there that may already know the value of the OA work that's being done, and go from there. So just want to make sure I'm not missing anything else here. I think I'll leave it at that for now. and I'm happy to answer questions later or discuss it with you further. On to Laurel.
You're gonna give me 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes on, all right. Okay, so, hi, everybody. I'm Laurel Crawford. I am the Manager of Collection Strategy at Johns Hopkins. And this presentation that I'm gonna give reflects work that was also done by my colleague Nancy Shen at the Welch Medical Library, also at Hopkins in Baltimore. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. So, we've used insights to do a number of different things. I'm gonna blow through them, happy to answer questions afterward. We've done it to support our work investigating open access trends. We've evaluated read and publish deals, which I sometimes call RMPs, so read and publish. And we've also talked about how we're going to strategize to answer the demands put upon the university by the Nelson Memo. So, let's see. Oh, I wanted to show y'all that library, which is our very pretty library that neither one of us work at. I get to go there sometimes, so that's fun. Okay, so. Context, Johns Hopkins, you've heard of it, very high research output. We are the highest federally funded university in the States for 43 years running. It is a lot of money. We have very, very lean library staff. We also have a lot of, it's very distributed policy-wise and budget-wise and planning-wise, strategy-wise. We have many different libraries that work together. Our open access values, I would say, are experimenting, trying to be innovative, and they're evolving, so probably like many of you. So, some of you have seen me before speak about collection development. That's my background. Two big things that we always need to remember in collection development are that we need to be user-centered and evidence-based. And we can take that kind of thinking and apply it to open access, which is how we get to a tool like Insights, right? We want to make sure that we're looking at evidence about our local users' needs. So you can read the literature all day long, but what people are doing all over the world doesn't necessarily apply to your local institution and their needs. And we can also, we can use Insights or its underpinning database Web of Science if you don't have Insights to check our assumptions about what our users need. All the time, we're hearing from people, administrators, faculty, we need this, we have to have that, I'm freaking out. But do they? So go check your assumptions and use evidence. Here are some of the things we can use to check our assumptions. Publication counts and open access expenditures are two of the quantitative things that I've been looking at. All of the things you see on the right-hand side of the screen, all of those things are available within these tools. Very helpful to help you understand what's going on at your university. We also want to caution, I would like to caution you to, publication counts are very important. Where are your people publishing? How are they doing? All the things that we were talking about before. But what we want to do is be cautious about estimating open access expenditures at a given publisher by trying to combine APC rates, the amount of the APCs with the people and where they're publishing, because it's not going to be all that accurate. There's a lot of discounts and waivers in play at your institution. It kind of depends. So just be cautious with that. You can make an estimate, but it's not going to be all that accurate. And while I have the floor, may I say, qualitative data is very important. Don't forget to be talking to your folks, okay? And I want to beg you, don't just listen to your VIP faculty who are squeaky wheels. You've got to be talking to early career people, people lower on the ladder, grad students, and your early career professionals. So that's my soapbox. Now that you know you can get this data, what do you do with it? Okay, I'm going to talk to you about several situations. Going to go through them very fast. The first thing that I like to do, the first example I have is hybrid dips and flips. So hybrid journals, the bane of my existence. So they are creating a potential double dip situation where I, the library, am paying for a subscription as well as my researchers or somebody else's researchers paying for publication costs in the form of APCs. That is a double dip. We're paying twice. If the publisher plans to flip the journal to OA and is doing so in a transparent way, I'm a little bit more cool with it. But recently we've been using Insights to look at specific publishers and see what is the percentage of articles in a given hybrid title. And here's one example from a publisher who shall not be named. I became angry. I discovered that we have 41 titles that are greater than 50% open access within the title. Why am I paying for those? Why am I paying for those? Why am I paying for those till the end of time? I ask. So it just gave me a second to pause and think about that, and I did that within Insights. Let's see. I wouldn't say I'm going to cancel the whole package or anything like that, but I will go to the publisher and ask questions. So this gives you a data-informed strategy for the negotiation. Okay. Only got a couple of minutes. Are you a high output institution or a low output institution? That's something that you should know before you enter into any negotiations. You probably know it. You have a feeling. I certainly know that Hopkins is a high output institution. Everybody knows that. But it's good to be able to go and see numbers and check and look at it by publisher. So if you're doing a negotiation with a publisher, you need to enter that with the information about that publisher. And then, of course, with your multi-year agreements, you can see trends over time. And that's another thing you can do within Insights. It's really important to keep an eye on those multi-year agreements. They're not set it and forget it. You have to be doing work on them and keeping tabs on them. Nelson Memo. Okay, let's see. Okay, no, we're not at Nelson Memo yet. So I looked at Insight to see whether an RMP deal that we had for 3 years changed user behavior. Did it or did it not? It didn't cover all of the open access. I wanted to see, did it drive people toward that publisher? And what we can see from this data, because let's see, from Yale's perspective, the green, the top one, is the amount that they selected open access. Over the course of the 2 years that I have full data for, you can see that the green didn't really go up. The rate was the amount of the open access choice was the same, and actually people chose this particular publisher less often over the course of the deal. We were worried we were driving too much business toward one publisher, and it really didn't happen. I'm not sure how I explain this. Maybe it's pandemic. Some of this predates my tenure at the university, but I can go and see this, which is really important. Nelson Memo. Well, I have the floor. Remember, publisher paid open access is not the only way to comply with Nelson Memo mandates. Please remind your people of that. But if we're going to look at it, we can look at a couple of things. The first question I asked was, how much of Hopkins research is federally funded as measured by article count? So articles are the outcome, the product of the research. And it turns out that I found that 80% are federally funded. What does that mean? If the institution comes at the library and says, hey, you've got to fund all this Nelson Memo business by paying APCs, I'm going to say, that's hilarious because there's no way I could ever afford that, right? And getting these numbers, 29,000 articles. I can't fund that. Who could fund that? Nobody. I think the important thing, well, also, I was not that surprised because we get 89% of our funding from the federal government. That would probably be a lot less for most institutions, but it's an important fact to know. I said, I have my notes here. Tell everybody that this is ridiculously unsustainable. So, yeah. And then the second Nelson question that I was able to look at, if I'm going to end up paying for some things, full disclosure, I'm not so hot on RMPs. I don't love them, but that's my personal professional opinion, not the opinion of my institution. If I'm going to end up doing it, where should I focus my efforts? I can look at Insights and see where are my federally funded articles being published. Who should I focus on? So I have deals with some people, but not all people. So look at my top 5 here. Should I go to Elsevier first? Perhaps because they have the most number of federally funded articles. I had a couple of things to say, and I think about Insights. Something important to remember, there are other tools out there. Insights is powerful, it's familiar, it is curated, so it may be good for some purposes and not other purposes. The curation part of Web of Science, it means that it's high quality content, but it does limit it because it's not completely comprehensive over the entire universe of scholarly output. I do think one thing, I've had so many conversations with people in this room about this. If you're an administrator in a library or in Power, it's important to remember that these kinds of tools are very important to help people like me who have too much to do, but we're talking about huge amounts of money. It's a good idea to provide tools with all of this data linked together in one tool so that a person can sit down and do this data analysis without an entire team of people. So highly recommended. Yeah, so I'm ready to take questions and invite the audience.
So I just wanted to,
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's the last
what
slide.
she just said. There's Laurel's information and her colleague Nancy, so we're all open to your feedback afterwards. And here's the QR codes for those case studies. You could pick it up on paper here. But I did want to reiterate something that Laurel said that I should have said, that even if you don't have insights and you have Web of Science, you can still do a lot of this analysis. So, please talk to us about that if that's your situation. But yes, we do have time. I think we have like 10 minutes. So please, we all kind of went through this like super quickly, but if you want to look at anything in more detail, we could pull it up, or any thoughts or questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's leave the QR codes up. Good idea. Questions? Comments?